you get that phone call, and it's heartbreaking. And, you know, so I knew shortly uh, then after that I had to do everything I could. It dawned on me. I said, if the roles had been reversed and I died on that cruise ship, Ashley would have fought like a tiger to
Mm.
find out what happened and all the details. So how could I do any less?
20 years ago, her daughter set sail on a cruise to celebrate her birthday. 24 hours later, she was dead. Ever since, Jamie Barnett has fought to make those massive ships safer for passengers. Today, she talks to us about her own personal tragedy and how her life's mission has navigated her towards one of Central Virginia's biggest unsolved mysteries, the disappearance of Amy Bradley. Well, welcome back to Untold. We are staying on topic again today for this third episode tied to the disappearance of Amy Bradley. And few parents can understand that anguish, a similar anguish, like our guest today, whose name is Jamie Barnett, and she is joining us from California. Again, we normally make people come and sit next to me, Jamie, but when they really have something important and interesting to say, we make an exception. So we are happy to see you and happy to have you. Why don't you tell us, just first off, tell our listeners how it is that you became connected to Amy Bradley's family?
Through a wonderful organization that was started back at the end of 2005, which is right when I lost my own only daughter,
Mhm.
as she went on a 3-day cruise out of Long Beach, California, down to Mexico. And I felt totally isolated and alone and unsure where to turn and who to go to for help. And I was fortunate enough to have attorneys that connected me with people who were going through similar traumas and
Mhm.
tragedies in their lives, and were already banded together. There were 4 families, all of whom had lost loved ones. Most of them in having gone overboard or disappeared,
Mm.
much like Amy's story. Mine is different. My daughter died due to substandard negligent medical care.
Mm.
And but I met with those families just as they were starting to testify before Congress about how terrible the situation was on cruise ships and that something needed to be done about it.
Mm.
And so that's right when I got in the beginning of 2006 and joined this organization. It's now grown tremendously. And we're called internationalcruisevictims.org. Um, Please visit our website. You can see some of the stories, some of the tragedies, some things you can do. One of the things we do is try to keep people safe,
Mm.
and you can find some of that information there. But that's what got me into this organization 20 years ago,
Wow.
and we've been out there doing everything we can for all those years.
So I want to talk a little bit about your daughter's story. Her name was Ashley. And as you said, you became involved right after you lost your daughter in 2005. She also was on a commercial cruise line. And I mean, I think, as you know from talking to the Bradleys, um, they really felt that they were sort of unheard and unseen, and that there was, a large concern about liability and not a lot of concern about the human being that was at the center of the crisis. Um, Tell us about your experience on that level with your daughter and what happened in her circumstances, if you would.
Sure. The story is that my daughter was dating a young man that was struggling to overcome drug addiction. And it was one of those tragic stories that you hear about over and over of wonderful, delightful, beautiful, inside and out young women who fall for the wrong guy, the
Mm,
bad boy.
mm,
And they think that if they love them enough, they can change them. And that's exactly where she was coming from. It was her upcoming 25th birthday, and her boyfriend decided to let's go on a cruise for your birthday. And he took her and quite a few of his friends, all of whom liked to party. And Ashley did not. She was absolutely well known for not being a partier, a drug user. Now, I'm not saying she was an angel. She would certainly have, a cocktail and that kind of thing. But drugs, no,
mm.
And so he smuggled onto the cruise ship. So there's the first thing right there that gets me when the cruise lines talk about they have zero tolerance for drugs. They sure didn't have any problem getting them on there.
Mm,
And he took a bottle of Dayquil and emptied it out and filled it with liquid methadone. And so somehow that methadone got into her. Um, we know she wouldn't have voluntarily taken it. That was not her at all.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I've been really good about going to friends of hers and saying, "Am I just being, a naive mom, in believing she wouldn't have done it?" And they were like, "Ashley, no,
Mm,
no, Ashley would never." So I feel good about, that it's not just a mom lens I'm looking through.
sure.
And but nonetheless, it got in her system. And one of the issues about a crime such as that occurring on a cruise ship is that you have very little chance of getting a good investigation into what happened. Her body got taken off the ship in Mexico, um, where it had to be autopsied.
Mm,
And, and, I don't mean to say anything bad about the Mexican authorities because trust me, I got more information from them than I did from our own FBI.
mm,
Um, but it isn't the same as
right.
if you had an autopsy in the United States. And then for her to come back into the United States to cross the border, her body had to be embalmed.
Mm,
So that's the kind of thing people face when something like that happens outside the United States, especially on the high seas. And so then we had to hire a private forensic pathologist, and all he had to work on uh, to figure out what happened to her was the fluid in her eye. And it, as he put it, showed that she was a victim of methadone poisoning.
mm,
But we don't know how it got in her. We don't know whether she accidentally thought that was Dayquil and took some,
mm-hmm.
or whether somebody slipped some of it in something she was drinking. And as the authorities have told us, it wouldn't take very much for her
Right.
to be a lethal dose of methadone because her system, had no drugs like that or any in her. So, but nonetheless, apparently, when the alarm was sounded that, the 911 on the ship, I was told she was viable when they reached her by a volunteer fireman who ran down the hall. Um, But it took over 30 minutes to get a defibrillator to her.
Oh.
And by then it was too late. So, you know, and you get that phone call and it's heartbreaking. And, you know, so I knew shortly uh, then after that that I had to do everything I could. It dawned on me. I said, you know, if the if the roles had been reversed and I died on that cruise ship, Ashley would have fought like a tiger to
Mm.
find out what happened and all the details. So how could I do any less? And so that's what I began to do. And and then I started to realize, you know, I got to do everything I can
Mm.
so that I can help make sure no one else ever has to get that phone call that I got.
I can't imagine. I'm so sorry. I'm sure it feels like, you know, it was 20 years ago, but I imagine it feels like it just happened, you know, especially given the fact that Amy Bradley's story has been out there and getting, you know, a lot of attention and a lot of conversation. I'm sure is this stirring you in all of those ways? I imagine it is.
It does, but it's, you know, it's just like I said, you just imagine 20 years of working and trying to get this word out about the fact that something needs to be done.
Mm.
You know, that these are the circumstances. This is what you think they are, but here's what they really are.
Hmm.
And I can't get the word out. 20 years because the cruise lines have so much money
Mm.
and so much influence over the media. You know, um, a lot of the networks, you know,
Shy
one in
away.
particular.
Yes. Yes. I mean, they're very litigious, and a lot of people
Yeah,
fear
and
being
you
sued.
know,
Yeah.
one network in particular owns a cruise line,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they're obviously not gonna want to put a program on or a PSA or anything that would jeopardize the amount of revenue they get from, you know, the cruise lines.
Mm.
So it's like a little tiny David going up against a giant Goliath. And Congress is we certainly have our champions in Congress, and they have gotten us a long way um, toward making things safer. But oh my word, there's so much more that needs to be done.
Mm. I wonder when you sift through the details. I'm sure you've seen the documentary on Amy Bradley and perhaps the some of the interviews that we've done, which are a bit more in depth. Um, you know, do you watch that and say to yourself, okay, they should have done this, they should have done that? Like, what are some of the things in your mind that 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 could have been done better and been more attentive to in those circumstances, you know, in terms of transparency and investigation and all of that?
There's so many
There are a
things.
lot, I know.
Yeah. One thing, one thing I am always about right now is if the cruise lines would just warn people,
Mm.
you know, look, chances are you're going to be perfectly safe on this cruise. You're going to have a great time, but it's like a big city. It's like any city, rather. Um, the only difference is there's no independent law enforcement. The only law enforcement or quote unquote law enforcement is the security team that they have on these ships that's hired by, trained by the cruise industry. So there's
Hmm.
an inherent conflict right there.
Right.
When there's a crime committed, they're going to do everything they can to keep the bad rep and all that nastiness from touching the reputation of the cruise line.
Mm.
Their jobs are made for that. You know,
Mm.
that's what they're supposed to do. So it's not like when the police come to you on land in the United States, and they have your best interest at heart. They're not beholding to another entity.
Right.
They're there to help you. So there's that. The medical care on a cruise ship is touted as being state of the art. It's not.
Mm.
One of the things I tell people now often is, if you're on all kinds of medication, if you have certain medical issues, go to your doctor before you take a cruise. Explain to your doctor, I'm going to be on this cruise for a week or however long. I want to know I'm okay to go. Because we just heard the story recently of Mohammed Hamza and his wife, who had a heart attack and died on a cruise.
Mm.
And it happens. It does happen. So they are not a land-based type hospital equipped with everything under the sun, and one should not assume that that is the case.
Mm.
So
I also find it interesting that in both cases, it was sort of like they wanted the problem off the boat. It was like, we've got to keep going. We've got to keep everything on schedule. We're going to kind of push this problem over here and keep things moving, which, when you're the person who has lost someone or can't find your daughter, I mean, that's a pretty tough pill to swallow,
it sure is. It's I always say they want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
get it off, make it go away. Because it's not good PR
Mm.
if that word gets out. And the cruise industry thrives on good PR. This is going to be paradise. Nothing can happen to you on a cruise.
Mm.
You're not going to drive anywhere. It's all safe. Um, and without any warning to just, hey, you know, don't let your guard down totally. Make sure you're aware of your surroundings. Bad things can happen anywhere. This is just like a city.
Mm.
So,
Well,
yeah, it's one of the it's victims, families like the Bradley's family, my family, um, feel that they are re-victimized over and over and over
mm.
in the event of a cruise ship tragedy of the magnitude that both families have suffered. And every time we go to Washington to say, hey, my Congress member, please pay attention to the need for this. Please, here's my daughter's picture, here's her story. Um, and our hearts are left lying on the table there, and we get up and go, and in comes the cruise industry lobbyists, and pretty soon they've forgotten all about our story, and that's
Mm.
secondary victimization of the worst kind.
I can imagine it is. And to have hope that things will change and be met with this kind of resistance is, I'm sure, feeling, like you said, a David and Goliath, like uphill battle all the time. But I am curious to know, and I want to explore this. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I want to explore sort of the then and now. Have we made progress, and what things still need improvement? We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. If you're enjoying Untold, like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also rate and follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Jamie, I'm curious to know, as you stated, this is a huge behemoth lobby, powerful, massive organization of lawyers and defenders and people looking out for the liability of the cruise line industry. And you guys are constantly trying to find ways to make it safer and make people more aware of the inherent risks. Do you think you have made progress over the past 20 years?
I appreciate you asking that because we indeed have.
Yeah.
Here's a little bit of the background of how that happened. That group of families that came together and were lobbying Congress right when I first joined them met had a hearing, and the blessed memory Elijah Cummings
Mm.
uh, was holding the hearing, and he mandated that the cruise industry should meet with the cruise victims and try to come up with what it was that the industry would voluntarily agree to do to increase safety and security on a cruise ship. And so we met. Um, we went to Florida, where most of their headquarters are, and we were not allowed to bring our attorneys with us, but they brought theirs. I can tell you that. And so we talked about, well, the first thing we wanted, because the number one crime occurring on cruise ships, besides theft, is sexual assault.
Mm.
So we wanted to make sure every cabin had a peephole or a security latch, so that if someone knocked on your door, you didn't have to completely open the door. You could see who it was
Mm.
and converse. Um, they couldn't do that. They just couldn't do that because it was a marine door, and you can't drill a hole in marine. It was,
Mm.
an excuse for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we said, well, how about for man overboard detection? You have every passenger wear a little bracelet with a, you know, a
Like a
piece of a
tracker or
chip
something.
that would,
Right.
right, pick up them going overboard. And they were like, oh, no, no, our passengers wouldn't like to wear that. That wouldn't, no, they
Mm.
wouldn't like. So over and over and over. And I I thought, well, okay, let's check this. Do you cruise lines have any reciprocity with each other when you um, fire somebody for improper conduct? Do you then let the other lines know this is a do not hire here?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing to stop them from getting off at the next port and going to the office that hires these crew members, and saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. I used to work for yada yada yada." You know, uh, oh, no, 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 we don't do that. That would be in violation of their uh, civil rights. I don't know.
Right.
Okay. So what happened was they would agree to nothing,
Wow.
nothing.
Wow.
And so um, Representative Congressman Elijah Cummings said, well, then this is going to take legislation. And so we began to work and work and work on getting legislation passed. And it took years. But in 2010, we proudly were able to say that the first law that affected the safety and welfare of passengers on cruise ships was passed. And it's known as the CVSSA, which stands for the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010. Um, and it mandated all those things that we were talking about, well, almost all of them. um, so that was the first time peepholes were put in cabin doors. I mean, something the hotel industry
Right.
did decades ago. It was the first time they had viable rape kits on board cruise ships.
Wow.
It did some good things. It required public reporting of the crimes as they occurred on cruise ships. There's still issues with that. Trust me, everything that we got done they have managed to some way dance around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's so frustrating,
I'm sure.
really, really frustrating. But there indeed have been good things. Senator Blumenthal, just a couple of years ago, was able to get it mandated that um, defibrillators had to be placed all around the cruise ship, like you see in any public building here in the United States, an airport, what have you, government buildings, everybody, churches, everybody has defibrillators now, but not a cruise ship, except in their medical bay. And however, those are yet to be implemented. And that's been like 2 years at least.
Wow.
So things move really slowly. And it's really hard for us as an organization to be able to find out what's been done, what has been left undone. But yes, there are some really good things that we've been able to do. And there's a new bill, two new bills introduced in Congress just recently in this Congress, to remedy some of the things that they have managed to dance around, and to add additional um, uh, statutes that would protect cruise passengers and increase their security.
Let me ask you this. I know some people will sort of hear these warnings and hear a story like an Amy Bradley story or like your daughters and think like, oh, that's, a one-off. That's not the norm. That's extremely unusual. There's no reason to really consider this a dangerous scenario because, it doesn't happen that often. From where you sit, I'm sure you talk to families and people who have experienced this painful tragedy as you have. Um, is it, in fact, as rare as people think? Or are we only hearing about the most extreme cases? I mean, that that is sort of what I wonder, because you always have the cases where, maybe someone, you know, is found unresponsive and maybe they make it, or maybe they did disappear but they were discovered later, and these things might be happening more than we know, I guess is what I'm asking. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I wonder if you'd have a feeling on that.
Oh, I definitely do. That's a really good point that you make. Is why don't we hear a lot about all the crimes that are occurring? And there are a couple of reasons. Um, One is I think crimes are underreported.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the cruise line, um, you know, what happens is, let's take, for instance, let's assume it's an American that has been the victim of a crime. Uh, what happens is the FBI, who is nowhere near that ship, they're back in Florida or wherever, and but they're the ones that are the lead investigative authority. Um, but the cruise line is gonna call. This is interesting. I've asked, I don't know how many times, and every time I get a different story about what's the protocol.
Right.
Just tell me what happens when a crime is reported. And uh, they call, I would be certain, their risk assessment department first. Then they notify the flag state, and that's a whole nother problem we should talk about, because all the cruise ships are registered in foreign countries,
Mm.
which are very underdeveloped, and there's all kinds of reasons that they do that, that they're done like that, um, and let them know, and then they'll notify the FBI, or it could be reversed. You could notify the FBI first, and then the flag state. But the FBI will just say, okay, so, but what matters is how did the cruise line present that crime?
Mm-hmm.
Was it inappropriate touch or was it abuse? Was it sexual assault?
Right.
Right? So there's that. Because they're reluctant a little bit to report a crime, right?
Oh, sure.
Because then we go back to the whole feel good vibe the industry wants the cruise a cruise vacation to have.
Well, and there's a lot of
Uh,
leeway there for them in terms of, if they're the ones reporting it,
mhm, mhm.
it's easy for them to shade one way or the other how it might look, So they have a lot of
Of course.
power in that equation. Um,
Right.
do you think that someone who, has a child between, 18 and 30 maybe, um, do you think they have a legitimate concern to be worried about the safety of their child on one of these cruise ships today?
I absolutely do. Um, again, for many reasons, look at how much alcohol is consumed
Mm.
on a cruise ship. And we know that when people are gathered and there's a unlimited supply of alcohol, which is something that really bugs me too about the cruise industry. They have no compunction to limit how much someone is served. So, you just keep drinking. And I mean, common sense tells you what can happen. Fights and assaults and
Sure.
all kinds of things. And so there's that, and that's going to happen. And um, the the younger kids, even, and I will say this in truth, and this is something that the cruise lines never wants the public to know, because we have fought to try to get that as a statistic that is broken down, is how many of these sexual assaults that occur on a cruise ship were committed against minors.
Mm.
And it's about a third of them.
Mm.
There was a case recently of a 14-year-old young boy who was sexually assaulted in the sauna
Mm.
on a ship, and by two men who, I mean, just the story is hideous, and one of them ended up being HIV positive
Oh gosh.
and assaulted this young boy, 14. So I I worry, of course, about the grown women um, and young men, but I also worry about children because they have the kiddie camps, that kids can go to, and that's when a lot of these assaults happen when they're either going to or coming from the kiddie camp, and it's horrific. The assaults, and you can read about them, you can look them up, that are just terrible. So
Mm.
I urge people, and in our brochure, I say, hey, look, just don't ever let your children out of your sight.
Mm.
Just do not let them out of your sight if you're going to take them on a cruise.
You mentioned it was difficult to sort of nail down the number that you just cited, that a third of these sexual assaults are happening to underage victims. Um, how difficult generally do you find it to get information from the cruise lines that may not be flattering to them?
Impossible.
Mm.
The information we do get comes from that. Uh, the crime statistics are posted on the Department of Transportation portal. You can see them there. The third quarter, I guess no, second quarter stats just came out. So you can see the numbers, and they're, I think, grossly underreported.
Mm.
Um, and you must remember that these crimes that you're seeing on the DOT portal are only Americans. There are cruise ships all over. But these that you're reading are not representative of the crimes everywhere. These are just against or involving Americans.
Interesting.
Um, so it's you're not going to get, even if you're the victim, you're not going to get information from the cruise line. They're not going to tell you. You're going to have to,
Fight
that
for it.
this is so sad. You're going to have to get an attorney. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to file a claim against them so that you have the right to interrogatives. You have the right to have the people, in a deposition. That's how you're going to get information. Otherwise, you're not. You're just not.
Mm. Well, that's a good point to take another break. When we come back, I want to talk about your impressions of the Amy Bradley case and your continued relationship with her family. So we're going to talk about that on the other side. We'll be right back. If you're enjoying Untold, like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also rate and follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, I was referred to you actually by Amy's brother, Brad. He suggested that I reach out and said you were very knowledgeable and someone who could, share a broader message with people that he found to be very important. I wonder how much communication you have with the Bradleys now.
I would say Iva and Amy's mom, talk almost daily.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Wow.
and which is wonderful because I've known the Bradleys for years and years and years, but not like we have just since right before the show aired.
Mm.
And now, I just know every day I want to know how she is, how they are, because I can just imagine how much is riding on this wave of interest, this wave of awareness that is like nothing they've ever had before in terms of um, chances of getting the word out
Yeah,
of
it's
actually finding Amy.
big exposure for sure.
Yes. Yes.
And I, like everyone, I'm hoping that they receive some valuable leads out of this because it is getting a lot of circulation globally. This has kind of taken
Yes.
off. What are your impressions of her case? You've seen a lot of these cases, and I'm sure you've seen some of the missing persons cases on cruise ships as well. Do you think there's hope to find her?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I especially after I saw on the series how many people had sightings of her, how many reports there were, the
Mm.
picture of her that, that they showed and scientifically,
Matched.
examined and felt was indeed her. You can't just ignore that.
Mm-hmm.
I think absolutely. I don't think she went overboard. That's what I'll say. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think she went overboard.
Yeah, I think every
Um,
person we've spoken to on this, Brad and Chris and you, have been very firm on that fact. It doesn't seem like the facts of the story add up in that direction to us either, especially Brad's description of her not liking to be even near the railing and having sort of a natural fear of, falling in the ocean. It just doesn't seem like something somebody was having a great night would do. So, but I am still, I guess I'm surprised too that cruise ships don't have a way to know immediately that someone has gone overboard. Maybe they do now and didn't in 1998, but I've always assumed that there was some kind of alarm or radar or something that like would notify them about that. But I don't know if that's something you know about or not. But it
I know a
seems.
lot about
Do
that.
you? Okay.
Yeah, it's in our CVSSA
Okay.
that the all cruise ships be required to um, install and use man overboard detection systems.
Mm,
And for the longest time, we would go and we would talk to the Coast Guard, and they would say, well, we have to do a cost analysis. And we're like, I don't think it says if you can afford it,
right. That's not in there.
you should put a
Right.
man overboard detection system on there. I'm pretty sure that's not what it says.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it was, well, the equipment hasn't been perfected yet.
Mm.
So I'm just saying, it's been 15 years since that bill passed, and it's still not done.
That's very interesting, especially since there isn't a manufactured car on the road that doesn't beep at you if you park too close to the car next to you. But somehow, on a massive ship where you would have all kinds of other detections about hitting, I imagine, like, glaciers. I'm thinking of the Titanic here, but, like, they have to have the technology to do that by now. Yeah,
Oh
I've,
yeah,
I've been,
it does exist. We know one of the companies that has it ready to go, ready to go. Because I would be like, you know, trying to think of, okay, if this avenue isn't working, where else can we make allies and ties?
mm,
And so I called up one of the companies and we became tight. The man that was working for them, and I assume still is. I haven't talked to him in a little bit, but so we even went to Congress at the same time, our organization and his company, and saying, "Hey, we're ready. It's here. The law says you got to do it.
right.
You got to do this." Um, and for the life of me, I don't know how they get away with it,
Mm.
not doing it. One of these days, something's going to happen, and the wall, the whole thing's going to come tumbling down for
Mm.
them over this.
Are there many watchdogs like you who kind of keep them on their heels and keep pushing for all of these changes, or is that a small group?
It's really and truly our group
Mm.
um, that's doing it. There's another group that's wonderful called GCAN, Global Cruise Activist Network, and they're also wonderful. But their concern is what the cruise industry is doing to the environment,
Mm.
which is a whole nother can of worms. And we team up a lot um, with them um, because we see that degradation and that destruction too, and
Sure.
more than that, just like we do, other, you know, careless, their lack of concern. So, but really and truly, we're the only ones.
Well, I find it fascinating the bond that exists between the Bradley family and sort of all the people that have been connected throughout the years, and even the video editor that we interviewed last, Chris. We were talking to him, and there was a very moving moment where he started to cry and said he just hopes every day that Amy will come home. And I wonder, I asked him, I said, what is it that bonds you to the Bradley family? And he said, a shared experience. It's a shared trauma, that we both I didn't know her, but I felt theirs and I still do. And I wonder if that is similar for you in what bonds you to Iva Bradley. I wonder if
Yeah.
it's the same, you know, pain that makes it possible.
Yeah, I think sorrow is one of the deepest bonds humans have with one another.
Mm.
Um, and when Iva and I first started talking and talking about, because we were both excited that as that documentary began to go into production, they um, thought, you know what, we want to know more about how unusual this is. Does
Mm,
this happen? So they asked me to be part of the documentary, which, gosh almighty, I'm so grateful for.
mm.
Um, so Iva and I would talk about that back and forth. But anymore, when Iva and I finish a conversation, almost every one of them, and this is so rare, almost every one of them ends in "I love you,"
Oh,
and "Oh, I love you too." It's just what a bond,
wow.
what a bond, and
Yeah, I
I'm,
imagine there's just probably not a whole lot of people that really can understand that grief so specifically. And so you guys, are in a small group there. Um,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
I'm sure you think about Ashley every day as you do this work. I'm sure it's what drives you to keep
It is
climbing this steep
absolutely.
mountain.
Yeah, yeah, it is absolutely. I just uh you know, if all the work that we can do saves one life, that's that's good. That's great. I'm happy um for that. And I suspect that's happened. I really do. I do.
Do you know? And perhaps you don't know this yet because it is kind of soon. Do you know if the documentary has generated any new leads or any interesting facts even in your direction? Have people called you and offered interesting things?
Well, they've certainly found me
Mm-hmm.
and have reached out and offered words of support and comfort, and um it's and I have to say, one of the most heartbreaking outcomes of all of this is all the stories that
Mm-hmm.
have poured into our organization's email to
Mm-hmm.
international cruise victims. And some of these stories, like one of them happened in 1980. I can't imagine carrying around, all of this angst and sorrow and sadness and loss and aloneness for all these years. It's not like, um, because of the process of getting justice for what happened to your loved one on a cruise ship is almost nil. It's just not going to work out because of the complications of laws at sea, and what laws are able to grab hold of those cruises, which is very few. That's why they register in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, you know, if your loved one, like if Ashley's story had happened on land, I know that someone would have been found liable, and I would have gotten justice for her life. But it's doesn't mean it's going to bring her back. That's for sure, and that's what I've had to learn to live with.
Mm-hmm.
Is you know, uh, nothing's going to bring her back. But it is entirely different. The victims on a cruise ship don't know where to turn or how to proceed, or there's no support group for, like sexual assault support groups or that kind of thing for victims of crime on cruise ships. Although that has become something we do too. you know um, I've responded to every single one
Mm-hmm.
of those emails, and sometimes it's just to say, oh my God, what a sad story. I am so sorry. This has to have been very difficult. Or tell me your whole story so we can put it on our website if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's not a lot years later that we can do about it. Shoot, there's not a lot we can do about it
In the
if it
moment.
happened a week ago.
Right.
Um, but we're there. We're there, for that person who thinks nobody is. We are.
Well, Jamie, I applaud you and your strength and your work and your friendship with the Bradley family. It's so, again, I find it so touching that you guys are able to help each other through this and remain close. So I appreciate your time today. I appreciate the research and perspective, and I think it's really valuable information, to get out there about the risks and the real facts, the real numbers, and the real truth about the transparency of what is a very big business and a very self-protective business.
It's a good way to put it.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for being willing and able to shed some light on that. It's time that the tables turned and the public saw the other side of that glamorous industry.
Well, thank you so much. And everybody, we will see you again next time on Untold. Untold is a production of WTVR CBS 6. Executive produced by Mike Bergazzi and Katie Beck, directed by Nick Maharaj and Brock Taylor, and edited by April Harshman.